one of the things that we work on as a community is entering the operating system where true change can take place. And that means then a person has to learn how to self-regulate and change their brainwaves. And we've kind of spent so many years in studying how this phenomena takes place. And when we begin to move from our conscious mind to our subconscious mind, one of the things we have to move past is our analytical mind. And our analytical mind is that critical part of our mind that really weighs what we know against what we don't know. That's the simple way to say it. So when you're learning, when you're executing in your life, when you're navigating ethically, it's important to have an analytical mind. But when we tend to be a little bit aroused from stress, we become overly analytical, and the brain moves into these higher brainwave states called high beta brainwave patterns. And that causes us to become over-focused. When we're stressed, we get over-focused on things, we loop. And so in stress, we narrow our focus on everything in our environment that's causing us to feel this way, because you can't take your attention off the threat or the danger. So when we started looking to see how we can teach people how to change their brainwaves, we thought maybe we should do the opposite. Instead of them focusing on something material and narrowing their focus on something physical, to broaden their focus and put their attention on nothing, on space, on energy. And the act of sensing caused their brainwaves to begin to slow down from beta brainwaves to alpha brainwaves. But not just any kind of alpha brainwaves. We started to see that the disintegration that was taking place in the brain because of the hormones of stress, the brain started to systematically become organized. We started to see more coherence and order in the brain. We started seeing different compartments of the brain that were once subdivided start to unify into greater and greater communities. And what sinks in the brain links in the brain. So we saw this global sense of coherence taking place in the brain. And of course, in the beginning, there's an activation in the forebrain and the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe lowers the volume to the circuitry in the brain, and then all of a sudden, a person moves into this state of theta brainwave patterns. Now in theta, it's a very hypnotic state, and the person is very suggestible to information. And suggestibility is your ability to accept, to believe, and to surrender to information without analyzing it. And now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open, that you can rewrite a program. You can lay down new information. Now, that's what a hypnotist does when they program somebody to do something. But what if the person's eyes are closed, there's music playing in the background, they're sitting still, they're not eating, they're not smelling, they're not tasting, they're not getting up with their body, feeling and experiencing? Could they tune into information that is not in three-dimensional reality through their senses? And when people start to tune in to energy and information, not with their senses, but with their awareness, if there's resonance, coherence between the nervous system and the brain and the heart, this kind of entrainment takes place, and all of a sudden the person goes into this very aroused state of very, 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 very high gamma brainwave patterns. Now, not a little gamma, not a lot of gamma, not a whole lot of gamma. We're talking about a supernatural amount of gamma. The person's entire brain is aroused and super coherent, and that person is having that transcendental moment where they feel connected to something greater, when their senses are heightened, that what's going on between their ears is more real than anything they've ever experienced in their life. They're touching that field of information of the unknown self. And the more coherent the brain, the more orderly the signal, and the brain transduces that information into profound imagery. That kind of gamma that's taking place in that person's brain, the arousal that's created isn't created from fear or anxiety. It's not created from anger or aggression, and it's not created from pain or suffering. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss, and the orderliness that's taking place lights are out in the thinking neocortex, and that autonomic nervous system, the seat of what's controlling and coordinating all other systems in the body, is getting a very resonant, coherent signature. And that autonomic nervous system is controlling and coordinating all other systems. And all of a sudden, all the cells of the body are being touched with a greater frequency, and they start to jiggle or they start getting information that causes the cells to emit more coherent light and information. And the person says, I was so connected, I felt it in every cell of my body. As you said, it's physical, but at the same time, it's not. The arousal is creating a moment in time where they feel like they're connected to something greater. And you only need one of those moments where you cannot return back to being the same person again because you know too much. So when we see these moments where we see this kind of breaking of patterns and we see these kind of downloads taking place, as soon as we see that, or we see the frequency in the strip chart starting to go up, I can say to a neuroscientist who's sitting right next to me, oh, Lynn is gonna pop here in a second. Oh, what do you mean? Just watch, this is gonna get good. What do you mean? And there's so much energy in the brain that many neuroscientists are concerned that the person's having a seizure, except they're completely still, they have this huge smile on their face, and certainly something amazing happening. And it's not just in one region, it's global. And that kind of orderliness that's taking place, that connection that they're feeling, is such a level of integration that the heart is going into coherence at the same time. And there's a sympathetic response that takes place. And that sympathetic response is an arousal. And it's like a full, as you said, like a full body brain orgasm. The person's dipping into the divine. They're touching source. They're connecting to pure love. And I think that the cool thing about it is that it happens in all races, all diets, all sexual preferences, all social castes, all cultures. It happens young people, old people, sick people, health people, that nobody is so special to be excluded from the phenomenon. So that's a short story of it. You have stage 4 cancer, or you have serious ALS that's going to progress, then anything that the doctor says past that point begins to program the autonomic nervous system into a destiny. In other words, you have 6 months to live. People with this condition have the following things that happen to them. And because the person's feeling fear, they'll accept, believe, and surrender to that information equal to their emotional state. And that begins to program the autonomic nervous system literally to that destiny. And as you said, people can literally program themselves to die by thought alone the moment they associate their condition with some symptom. So then we've studied this enough times to know that that fear then is putting them in a state of emergency or state of survival. And it's literally weakening the body's immune system. It's literally down-regulating genes. It's literally endorsing or accelerating the health condition because there's no energy to heal. There's no energy in the person's internal environment for growth and repair if they're mobilizing all of this energy for some threat in their outer world. And so then the first thing is that the person has to understand intellectually, theoretically, analytically, that there's a difference between living in a state of survival and living in a state of creation, and that they have to work on learning how to lower the volume to the emotion of fear by catching the thoughts that begin to create those feelings. And when they feel those feelings, break the pattern, that feeling begins to activate more or influence more of the same thoughts. And it's this cycle of breaking the pattern of thinking and feeling that creates this kind of feeling of enormous discomfort. In other words, the moment you decide to make a change, get ready, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And the discomfort that we feel from not feeling fear sometimes is greater than the feeling of fear itself, because at least if we feel fear, we can at least feel something familiar or known. But when we're out in the unknown and we're no longer feeling fear, many people rush back, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they start forecasting the worst case scenarios in their minds. So when we combine that vision of the future, like that what's going to happen with me, to me, with the emotion of fear, we're literally conditioning the body emotionally to become the mind of fear. And in time, the body becomes programmed to such a degree that we could have a panic attack. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind. We program it subconsciously. So then Teaching people how to surrender into the present moment is one of the most important things that we've studied. When a person is sitting there and their body wants to lay down or wants to get up and quit, or they start feeling fear and they're going back to the past, instead of quitting and giving up on themselves, this is the time where they have to catch the thought of that worst case scenario and return back to the present moment. When the body gets vigilant and impatient and starts feeling anxiety and fear, that's the moment, instead of quitting, to settle the body back down into the present moment. And if you think of the body as the animal, as the servant, and you are training the animal, when it tries to run to the worst case scenario in the future, and you catch it and you bring it back to the present moment, that's a victory. It's not time to quit. That's actually a victory for you. When you notice, you remember what the doctor told you and the diagnosis and the emotion that goes along with it, and you go to the past and you catch yourself doing that and you return back to the present moment, you're executing a will that's greater than the program, or better yet, you're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And if you're doing this consistently over and over again, there comes a moment, just like training an animal, where the body finally surrenders into the present moment. And it's tedious in the beginning because our mind is so untrained, but if we stick with it and we keep remembering that every time we catch ourselves and when we're going unconscious and we become conscious and we keep returning back to the present moment, there comes a moment where the body acquiesces. And when that happens, there's a liberation of energy. Information and energy is being released from the body. We're going from particle to wave, from matter to energy. And energy naturally starts to move into our heart. And in a sense, we're transmuting pain and guilt and unworthiness into love. And the act of doing that begins to cause us to transmute fear, as an example, into a state of gratitude. Now, why is that important? Because I have talked to enough people that have healed from health conditions where they've always said the same thing. I just reached the point in my life where I was so happy with who I am, so grateful to be alive, I could care less if I had the disease. That is the moment their healing occurred, because the emotional signature of gratitude, when you're receiving something favorable, when you've just received something favorable, when something is happening to you that's favorable, or something that just happened to you is favorable, you feel this sense of gratitude. So the emotional signature of gratitude means it's already happened, or something wonderful is happening to you. So the body's so objective in a state of gratitude that it puts us in a state of receiving. So when we begin to feel gratitude and we trade fear for gratitude, we will accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts equal to that emotional state, and we can begin to program the autonomic nervous system into a different destiny. And overcoming fear is something that requires a tremendous amount of energy and a tremendous amount of awareness, because your brain keeps going to that moment in time where you remember the diagnosis and everything the doctor said afterwards. And people who have healed so many times just gave up, and they said, I'm not going to accept, I'm not going to believe, and I'm not going to surrender to that diagnosis without analyzing it. And I'm going to begin to change my thoughts, change my actions, change how I speak, change how I feel. So if we're in a state of gratitude, then we're suggestible to emotions and thoughts that are equal to that state. And that's how we begin the reprogramming process.